All right, so when we're looking at Fantasy Grounds, we're trying to figure out how to run this whole thing. Um, if you look at the lower part of Fantasy Grounds, you see these little brown rectangles. Those are kind of like your shortcuts that you can save information to. Um, if you click the Control button, it switches to a different set of shortcuts. If you hold down the Shift button, it does the same thing, the Alt button, and any combination of those three buttons. So Control, Shift, and Alt. Any combination of those three can give you another set of shortcuts that you can add. And the way that you would add a shortcut is, for instance, you see like I have this D20 down here. If I want to add something to my shortcut, let's say I want to clear, so I can right click on a shortcut if I decide that I don't want it anymore and then just choose to clear it. If I want to add one, like for instance dice, if I have a specific set of dice and I'm like, okay, I need 3d6s for some reason that I know that I'll be rolling very often, so I need to be able to save it to a shortcut so I can use it over and over again. I would click and hold down on the d6, and then if I need 3 of them, I would right click twice, so then 3 d6s are now present on there. I would drag that in, and so then my mouse button is scrolled over the actual shortcut itself, and then I drop it in. I now have 3 d6s that anytime I click on those, it'll roll 3 d6s for me, and that'll appear in the chat box over on the left side. So I don't want that, so I'm just going to get rid of it. Okay. In creating, and if whenever you're doing dice rolls that might not be on your character sheet, you would go to the modifier over here. You would click on it, and then you would type in a number. I just put in 5, and then I need to roll a d20. I drop that into the chat box, and I get d20 plus 5, getting 22. The modifier will then clear itself, and so each time you want to use the modifier, you have to put in the new number again. So it's a little annoying, but at the same time, most of your stuff should be in the character sheet information for your rolls. In the chat box, you are able to add different types of extra things to it. For instance, languages. In the world of Tanu, we've got all these different languages that exist. And the general default is to not really have any language set, and that's pretty much just representing common. So if you're speaking Feronian / common, then you can just leave the chat bubble blank, and then that will represent speaking in common. Maybe sometimes you'll come across NPCs or characters that can't speak common, and if that's the case, you would switch to Feronian common, so then you would write down hello, and then what that means, it says understood by, so it'll let anybody know, like who, or at least let me know who and like what characters can understand what's being said. If I write hello in Denarant, for instance, we get to see this text, and anybody who doesn't understand it will only see the text. Anybody who can understand Denarant would also see the hello, so they're able to communicate with that character. It's a really cool feature to allow the surprise of an NPC being able to type out the dialogue to a player character that can understand them, that maybe the other player characters can understand, rather than having to do the metagaming of everybody hearing what the DM is saying to that PC and then just having to accept the fact that they don't know what they said. It's a really cool feature in this. So when it comes to creating a character, you would go up to this box over here called Characters, click on that. You now have your character selection screen that opens up, and you see there's a bunch of random characters creating this. Some of these are NPCs that I wanted to have a character sheet for, and a lot of them are player characters in the different games that I'm DMing right now. To create a character, you would click on the little green circle with a plus sign, says Add Item, click on that. you now have this character sheet. It's kind of blank, it starts fresh for you. Anytime you need to write anything, you would just click on the line that you need to write on. So if you want to put in a name, you are Fred. And then your class and level. So I'm going to describe how you would input everything for the Tanu world. In Dungeons & Dragons, it's much more straightforward because all the stuff is already there for you. This is built for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. So you'd have to do a little bit of customization with 3.5 in adding some more skills to it. But I'm going to explain how to do Tanu. So class and level, you leave blank. Don't even touch it, completely leave it alone. Background, that's just information that you can input about your character if you want to. Race, let's say we've got a Feronian, and so it's just a traditional human. These are the important scores that you want to take into account when it comes to your ability scores. Because in Tanu, we don't have every 2 points above 10 represents 1 point of a bonus type and all that junk. Instead, we only take into account the bonus points. And so if you have a 1 in strength, we have to take the strength of Dungeons & Dragons and just put it at 12 to make sure that this is the appropriate number that we're looking for. If I have a 2 in dexterity, then I need to put a 14, so then this shows the 2. And then my constitution, maybe I'm not a very strong person. I have a -1 in my con, so I need to take that and turn it into an 8. And then the other stats, let's say I'm hot, and I've got a 3 in my charisma, so I add 16 to charisma. And then my wisdom, let's say I've got a -3 in wisdom, very not wise person, and then just basic intelligence. You don't put anything in your max HP or your wounds. Technically, I guess you could put in, it's either 10 or 15 for the number of wounds that you can sustain before you really go out, but that can just be completely left alone. And the only thing you ever write in is each time you get hurt and I tell you, oh, you took a wound point, you took 2 wound points, you put those here to represent the number of wounds that you've sustained. But that should just be a 0. And you'll notice, like, it highlights it a little bit when you scroll over some of these bubbles, but then when you click on them, it doesn't really look like anything's actually been clicked on, but it is. And now you can just type something in there. Then, skills. Now this is an important part of the game because the entire system of Tanu is built on skills. All attacks, all spells, all everything is built on skills. We don't use any of these. Some of them might have the same words as what are used in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, or 3.5 might be the same thing as the words that are used in Tanu, but we don't use the skill list here because we don't want to mix in the Tanu skills with the Dungeons & Dragons skills. We just don't want to deal with that. So instead, we click on this box down here for Edit List. We then add a ton of bubbles for new skills to be put in. And when you're inputting them, for instance, I want to put in muscles. If I'm going to put in muscles as a new skill, I need to put period and then type in muscles. That way all of the Tanu skills appear before the Dungeons & Dragons skills, and we never have to look at the Dungeons & Dragons skills again now because of that. And I just do that for all the skills that are in the Tanu system, every single one of them. There is a list of different types of knowledges to take into account, so you should list out all those knowledges, so then you have them all there. List out every single skill that could possibly happen in Tanu, so then that way you're ready to roll for any of them. Then you click on this until, so like, this represents the stat that is applied to that specific skill, and muscles is a strength base, so that represents there, and it shows our strength bonus that's being applied to the total over here. And let's say I have a 2 in muscles, and so then all together the total will be 3. And whenever I need to roll for my muscles check, all I need to do is click and hold on the little gray dice looking thing that's next to the total box, drop it into the chat box. And then it'll even say Fred did a skill roll of muscles, modifying the strength. So D20 plus 3 equals 17. It calculated all that for us. We didn't have to do any adding or anything like that. That's one of the wonderful things about Fantasy Grounds. We do not click any of these buttons for the Tanu system because this is referring to proficiency, and that would end up messing with the points of the Tanu system. It would be used in Dungeons & Dragons to represent what skills you're proficient at, especially in 5th edition when they have proficiency bonuses. Like you would just do that, and then they would take into account those bonuses over here in the total. But for Tanu, we completely leave it blank. We don't do anything pertaining to the proficiencies. So you add in all your skills here, and then you're good. You change the stat, you add in the bonus, all set. Then you go to abilities, and there are no feats in Tanu. Everything is built on skills. Features, that can all just be, for instance, you can just write in like have a scar over the left eye. And so then that way you have these things to write in that at any point if somebody or you could physically describe yourself completely, and then when the DM in that first game is like, what does everybody look like, you could just take that, drag it over into the chat box, drop it. Oh, that didn't work. Why didn't it work? Okay, there we go. Have a scar over the left eye. So you'd be able to, yeah, there we go. So you're able to add that information right here so then people can see that physical information about your character if they want to know. Traits, once again, are things that you can add in about your character, personality traits. For instance, I have worldview and beliefs and all these other things, and so you can write in that you're an optimist, and maybe you're also, your love language is touch, and your beliefs is the Kernigans, which are a set of gods inside of the world of Tanu, and your lawful evil. And so those are just examples of things that can be traits inside of the Tanu world. Don't really have to deal with proficiencies, but languages is very important. So my intelligence is a 10. Let's say I have an intelligence of 14 instead, in order for us to be able to add some languages in. You have one language in the game just because. If you have an intelligence of 10, you at least have one language. If you have any intelligence below 10, you only know how to speak your language. If you drop low enough that you're at like -4 for your intelligence, for your bonus over here on the right, then that's when you have to start taking into account your character might even not speak very well. But you get at least one language that you can speak and read and write if you have an intelligence of 10. Every point that you have an intelligence, so yeah, that's D&D. So if you have a 0, you can speak, read, and write a language. If you have a 1, that means you can speak and read and write 2 languages. If you have a 2, that means you can do 3, and so on and so forth. So, languages. Let's say I'm a Feronian, so I'm going to pick Feronian / common. And the reason why I'm doing that is that anything that you write, you should look over in this chat box to be able to determine what you should type out in the language. That's very important, because if you type it out wrong, then it won't recognize you as someone who knows that language. So you type in Feronian / common, so then that way the computer, the software knows you know Feronian / common. And so I get 2 more languages. I'm going to say I speak I'm always a player that likes Celestial, so let's just say this character knows Celestial, and then let's also go with Cathusian, which is the language of mermaids and stuff. Cathusian. And let's just clarify that we spelt everything right. Celestial, Cathusian, make sure to make it capitalized because they're capitalized in here. Feronian Common, yep. So, and let's say, oh, whoops. So we're done editing that. So it is now recognizing this character as being able to speak these three languages. If a player were to take this character over and start playing as them, and then I typed something in and I decided it was going to be in Celestial, then that's what everybody else would see, but this character would see the hello. And this would it would also say down here, understood by Fred. So then that way it's like people know what's going on. Inventory. When it's time for you to write in stuff that your character has, you would go to the editing, you go to equipment, and then you add in all the items that you have. And it shows like right here the number of them that you have. So you can add the quantity in. If it's like arrows, for instance, you can put in 30. Let's do bone-tipped wooden arrows. So they're kind of primitive. And then we have one like primitive, let's just do a wooden bow. So then we know like what it's made out of and everything. And then I would write down all my other items and stuff like that in here. And items are completely up to the character that's making their character inside of Tanu. I don't really like restricting how much people can start with. I let them kind of figure that out for themselves. The only thing I say to them is take into consideration the level of your character. If you're first level or something, then maybe you should take that into account and say, well, I'm not super powerful. And if somebody does just write down, I have a bag of holding that is, if you open it, there's actually a castle inside, and I rule this castle, and I have 500 servants, and I have a ring that destroys the universe if I snap my fingers. Then I'd start saying, okay, you're going a little bit overboard. But if somebody really wants to say, like, I have something special with me, I have something powerful, I'm okay with that as long as you come up with a story for it. Why do you have that thing? Is there any weaknesses because of this thing? Is it cursed? Are there bad things that are going to happen to you if you lose this thing? Like, what's the story? And then when it just comes to mundane things, tell me why you have these things. Be prepared to explain yourself, like when it comes to your equipment. So we've got that. Like, we just write out all of our equipment in there. Then for treasure, you just write down, like, I tell you how much money you have based on your inventory. If you don't give yourself a lot of stuff at the beginning of the game, then I usually give a character quite a bit of gold to start the game with. If somebody gives themselves a ton of stuff, I might say, okay, you've kind of maxed out your stuff. I'm going to give you 5, and then you write in here gold. You also can take into account silver. Oh, you write that in the little box there, silver, and then you can also write down copper. So then that way maybe you end up spending one of your gold, and the way it works is that 10 copper equals 1 silver. 15 copper equals 1 silver. 2 silver equals 1 gold. So if you spent a gold, you could say that, okay, I want 1 silver then, and then I want 15 copper. If I want to distribute some of that across my wealth so then I can spend it accordingly, I can do that. Because 15 copper would be 1 silver, and 2 silver equals 1 gold, so 1 silver and 15 copper equal 1 gold. So that's just the money system inside of Tanu. And then here you list whatever gender you want to represent as, age, height, weight, size. Most characters are medium, but like characters like Arachii are considered large, and so on and so forth. Like there are different size categories for different races. Dinarans are small. And so you would put in that size category, and that actually affects your ability score bonuses. But that would be something that you would figure out by just reading over the rule book of Tanu. Alignment is the same thing as what you put in your traits, just as information about yourself, so you can just put that there in alignment. Deity is the same as your beliefs, so like you would just tell us what God you are. Personality traits, ideals, bonds, flaws, appearance, notes. This is all just role play stuff that you just fill in, so then you really flush out your character. Faction is an interesting thing because there are quite a few countries that exist inside of Tanu. And so you would choose what country you're kind of a citizen of. Like, where do you hail from? That's what you would write in the faction spot. And and then actions, you don't really have to write anything in here for Tanu because everything is built into the skills system. All weapons, all everything. So that all goes here. And that's it. Then you'd have a character inside of Tanu. For adding a portrait, what I need from players is an image that I would then be able to click on the portrait for your character. I'd click on here, and any pictures that I've uploaded into this software would now be available to me to be able to add as one of your tokens. There's also just like the built-in ones that they have inside of fantasy rounds. They're kind of like they're quite basic, and so and then they have these like more flashy ones, cooler looking ones, more cartoony looking ones in this other box. But really, the best thing would be just for you to find an image somewhere or draw something yourself or whatever, and then like send it to me so then I can upload it into the software. So it's an option here, so then we can give you that. The reason why that's important is because if we go to images, and you'll notice that some have a P next to them to represent that they're public, so anybody can open that file and see it, and then anything that doesn't is just something that I as the DM can access. So if I bring up this battle map, we then need to, come here Fred, where are you at? Fred. Okay, well we're going to give Fred a random image for right now. This is Fred. So I can exit out of fantasy rounds, and if I'm editing this map and everything, but I want to put Fred in this map, I would drop him into the map. Why didn't I do it? I want Fred on the map. Oh yeah, I'm supposed to drop him in over here in order to be able to add him to the map. And let's say I want Fred to start over here, and I'm going to be putting Fred here to start for when the players see it. So you see like all this space that's been kind of illuminated now because the POG has traveled through that area. You'll notice that I can place him anywhere as the DM, which means like putting him in walls and stuff, which isn't good for Fred. But players, when they're actually moving their pogs on the map, won't be able to travel into these spaces because you'll notice these things called line of sight. I can add line of sight over different areas, so then that way when you're deciding to travel, like these are all wall line of sight, so you can't travel through those spaces. But I can. But I'm starting you here. You notice all this space illuminated slightly because of Fred going there, but I don't want the players to have seen that, so I can reset the fog of war. Everything is dark now. The only thing that the player will be able to see when the match first starts is this stuff. I want to reset it again so then they can't see down that hallway. So if I have monsters and stuff hidden, they won't be able to see this. All of this will actually appear as like a brown, like there won't be map there. And then as they can zoom in, they can click on their POG, and then to move it around, they can either click and hold down on the POG and be able to move it like this to be able to move to different squares on the map, or you'll notice the POG illuminates like with a black line around it to let you know that you are clicked on it. You can also use your arrow buttons, your up, down, left, right keys, in order to be able to just move from grid square to grid square, which makes it a lot easier than doing it with the mouse, because then you can be like, well, I need to go 30 feet forward, so 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, 30. Okay, that's my distance that I can travel per 6 seconds per turn. Um, and so you can travel, you can move around, but you'll notice I can walk into there, but that's because on the DM setting pogs versus a player who wouldn't be able to travel through line of sight spaces. So that's I'm going to delete that now, delete all tokens, and I'll close this because that's not where Fred is. Fred doesn't exist, and I can also share pictures of creatures that are in my stories and stuff like that. And I would right click, and then it says stop sharing, but that's because this picture is shared already and it's been made public. I can stop sharing it, and then if I want to reveal it to everybody, I can open up this picture on Fantasy Grounds, and then instead of stop sharing, I'll say share sheet. I can click on that, and then all my players, that image will then pop up on their screen and they'll be able to see it. So that's it for images and maps. I can import files and be able to update things. There are notes. You can add notes to this, so then that way you can see the story that's going on, or you can write down notes about what happened in the game, so then you can keep track of names of characters and NPCs that you come across. There are lots of tables that I've created to be able to allow lots of random things to occur inside of the game. So there's tables, and then stories, which are just random like templates that I've created that allow more random things to occur. NPCs can also be added to the map. There's a lot you can do with Fantasy Grounds. But that is the big, oh, and you can also change the color of your dice with this little circle. And that's about it when it comes to the things that you absolutely need to know in order to get a game going inside Fantasy Grounds. So that's all.